Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. It's so nice to see so many lovely smiling faces, sort of. Um, and I hope everyone's had a lovely start to 2023. Um, so here we are, back in the open days. For those of you who've not come before, which would be normal, shouldn't be coming every week. That's only my job. My name is Matt. I look after the research team here at UniAdmissions. And so my job is to make sure that everything that we talk about in this presentation, across our website and throughout all of the support we provide, that we can back it up with numbers, that it all makes sense, that it's got some good R-squared values behind it, that it's stuff that really works. And I'm joined today by my colleague, James. Who are you, James? I know, but do these people?
That is a very, very good question. Yeah, hi guys, Happy New Year. So my name's James. I work with our students, sort of helping them set, clear plans of action to tackle their, applications to Oxbridge and medicine, perhaps. So yeah, that's what I do.
Cool. Yes, a busy time of year to be a doctor, I hear from what I'm seeing in the news. So if that's what you'd like to get into the business of, then looks like they could use your help. I guess it'll take a while to train you, but worth a try. Now, we're going to be talking today about reapplying to Oxford and Cambridge. So I know that many of you will have had the disappointing experience in the last few days of discovering that you may not have got the place that you were hoping for in either Oxford or Cambridge. And so a lot of people, their immediate reaction is to say, right, well, next year, I'm going to get it. And so while that's sort of fresh in your mind, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about how that might work for you, what the advantages, what the disadvantages of reapplying are, and really give people a sense of how to go about that process if that's what they're really going for. So off we go. So as I mentioned a second ago, for a lot of students, the moment that you have got that bad news in the, I don't know whether it's via email or via post these days. It was via post back in my day. He has told us that Cambridge aren't sending their offers through for a couple of weeks, but I say this very much applies. We know that a lot of Oxford offers have gone out, right, James?
Yeah, Oxford offers were earlier this week. So yeah, I think there's a sort of steady trickle of news coming through. But yeah, don't be alarmed if you haven't got a response yet. You will get a response.
Yeah, they don't. It isn't that they pick their favourites and then do it from best to worst. It is. It's more of a logistical challenge of just sending a lot of information out to people. So don't worry if you haven't heard. But I say for a lot of students who are disappointed, their first reaction will decide that they're going to reapply, more or less immediately. Now, reapplication, it's a big time commitment. You are looking at doing, effectively a whole other UCAS cycle. So, pretty much a year to get that offer. And of course, there's no guarantee that you're necessarily going to get in on your second attempt. And so it's not a decision you want to make lightly, not least because if you are, if you apply to a range of universities and you've got offers from other places, a UCL, a King's, a Warwick, reapplying means that you have to turn down those offers because Oxford and Cambridge won't consider you if you're already studying at another university. Now, all that is to kind of scare you a little bit, but the thing to bear in mind is you also don't have to make a decision right now. You've got all the time in the world you need. You don't have to make a decision right through until June or July when you would be making a decision on your offers anyway. And so what I would suggest is making sure that you keep your options open. So the first thing to do there is to write down all of the questions you were asked at interview. To the extent you can, remember what you said. Try and document what happened. so that you can reflect on it and think about where you can improve. It also gives us a chance, if we have a conversation with you, if you know what those questions were, it gives us a chance to reflect on the kinds of things they were testing you on and really bring our expertise to bear on your particular case, which of course is much harder to do if we don't know what they asked you. You should, as a matter of routine, request feedback from the university, find out what they thought of you. You know, was it that your admissions test score wasn't as good as it could have been? Was it that you struggled in the interview? It may have been that you just had, you know, a little bit of bad luck. We've had students with really spectacular grades and scores in years past not receive offers, and it can simply be down to being in a situation where you were really, really good, but unfortunately you were one of 5 unbelievably good people. And had you been applying another year, perhaps less competitive, you know, strange things happen at the far end of bell curves, essentially. You should also make sure that you download a copy of your UCAS form. This sounds silly, but you don't want to fill it out all over again from scratch. It's quite a long, quite a fiddly form. Make sure you've downloaded all of that information so that when you come to fill it out again, you can just fill in the same information all over again. And ask your school for a copy of the reference they've sent on your behalf. So speak to whoever it was at your school who prepared the reference and get a look at a copy of that so that you can see if there's anything there that perhaps may have had an influence on the outcome. Now, you'll notice we haven't mentioned the personal statement here. That's because you've already got your personal statement. It hasn't gone anywhere unless you burned it after you sent it in, which would be brave. Burned the computer you type it on? Who knows? But this is intended to kind of reflect the balance of the different elements of the application, which is kind of a little subtle hint for James that he should be ready to talk about the pie chart.
Always ready to talk about the pie charts. Yeah, okay, so the pie chart indicates really how you're assessed when you apply to Oxford and Cambridge. So things have changed over time. I think, you know, most people are aware that your grades that you achieve at school, you know, whilst important, they've become a little bit more like a tick box exercise, I would say, at the moment, where you have to achieve a certain, you know, level of grades, but simply having those grades doesn't really mean anything. So actually, we'll go through the pie chart here. It's the admissions tests and interviews, you know, by a significant margin that dictates your chances of getting an offer, we see. So yeah, you can sort of see here that it's roughly sort of 20% based on your grades, and then, you know, largely based on your test and your interview. You know, over COVID, we were saying 40% test, 40% interview, 10% personal statement, UCAS reference, 10% grades. I think grades is sort of bumping up a little bit this year. So yeah, I would echo what Matt says. If you're going to reapply, try and identify, you know, how you performed in the application, particularly how you performed against your cohort in your admissions test. You want some real clarity on that. And then secondly, ask for feedback from you know, the universities about your interview as well. I think to make a clear decision about whether to reapply or not, you need to understand what potentially went wrong. And yeah, I then sort of think about it in terms of how to improve next year and focus on your admissions tests and your interviews if you didn't. Because a lot of students, you know, probably spent more time on things that are less important. So, you know, maybe this gives you a bit of clarity if you were to reapply, where to focus most of your time. There we go. Pie chart done, Matt.
Thank you, James. Yes, I say the pie chart is to get a sense of how the different weights of these things fit together in the application. As James said, what you want to be doing is trying to identify the weaknesses in your first application. Was the problem the admissions test? Was it the interview? Was it the reference? Was it your personal statement? Now, to an extent, you'll be able to tell the answer here based on the stage of the process you got through to. If you didn't get to the interview, then you want to be looking at your admissions test and your reference and your personal statement particularly. And if you didn't succeed in the interview itself, then you want to be figuring out if there is more particular work that you can do for the interview. The interview is really important in terms of having that long run of preparation, because it makes it's much easier to succeed on a test, especially a multiple choice test, with a little bit of extra practice, whereas the interview is a much more subtle, a much more complicated kind of experience, and so it really benefits to you to have had a long run up to that, really developing the skills that you need to succeed in it. The other thing that you want to be thinking about here is really understanding what your motivation is, not only for having applied in the first place, but for applying again. Why is it that it's kind of Oxbridge or bust for you? Why did you choose the subject that you were going for? Were you able to convey your enthusiasm, your passion for it as well as you wanted? Really sort of look inside yourself a little bit and try and understand what your motivation is. Because there are a few questions you want to be asking yourself here as you get ready to reapply. The first is, are you going to apply for the same subject again? If you've applied for PPE at Oxford, are you going to consider applying for economics and management instead? If you applied for English, are you thinking about maybe going for history? Are you absolutely set on the subject you picked in the first place, or are you thinking that perhaps you want to give something different the second time around? And that needn't be, just because you're thinking you want to change, but also, your intellectual interests are hopefully developing or evolving. It may be that the kinds of things that you were interested in, a year ago when you were getting ready to apply the first time, that those things are going to be different when you come to apply again. The next thing to think about is which university. Did you apply for Oxford and get close and so you want to go again? Or are you planning to switch over to Cambridge and try the other one, or vice versa? The thing to understand here is, well, I'm going to come on to this on the next slide, a lot of people do reapply. In fact, way more than you would think, because the question that I normally get asked at this point is, people ask, is reapplying weird? Is it weird? And the answer here is basically no. Based on the data that I've gathered in 2020, which is the last year I have the data set for, I probably need to reapply for this, actually, get an update. 930 people reapplied to Oxford and 622 people reapplied to Cambridge. So what that means is, in 2019, 930 people applied to Oxford, and they also applied again in 2020. So there are 930 people, nearly 1,000 people, who in 2020 were coming back for a second attempt. And at Cambridge, there were just over 600 people coming back for a second attempt. So if we're trying to think about this statistically, what we can see there is, at an absolute minimum, about 7% of people applying to Oxford and Cambridge are applying for the second time. And on top of that, even more people switch over. There's no way for us to track the number of people who apply to Oxford one year and then to Cambridge the following year. But if we imagine that it's similar to the number of people who are applying to the same place twice, we can guess that perhaps 10 or 15% of people applying to Oxbridge in any year are doing it for the second time. That means that at Cambridge, there are more people who are having a second go round than there are applying for music or linguistics or classics combined. If reapplying was a subject at Cambridge, it would be the most popular subject by miles. So there's nothing odd about reapplying. if you were to go into the, if you were going into the interview room a few months ago and there were 10 other people there, one, maybe two of them were there for the second time, maybe even as high as 3. So it's not strange. A lot of people are there for the second time. And of course, because of the way these things work, because we're talking about repeating, another couple of those people are going to be back next year as well. So all of a sudden you're looking at 30, 40% of people in that interview room waiting in the queue, so to speak. 30 or 40% of them are either there for their second time now, or are there for their first time, not knowing it's going to be their first of 2. Was that clear, James? That didn't feel clear.
No, that was pretty clear. Basically, the headline is, as you said, it's really normal to reapply. A lot of students do it, and you shouldn't feel, you shouldn't have any negative emotions towards doing it. And as we'll go on to see, correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt, but actually statistically, the odds may slightly be in your favour if you reapply.
Yes, it does seem to work. I've actually got another summary slide that I put up here. I forgot about this one. So the way I represented this is to say, if you're applying to Oxbridge, the average applicant, they apply about 1.2 times. Now, obviously, you can't apply 1.2 times. You can only apply 1 or 2 times. But you're all smart young people. I'm sure you know what I mean. So, as I said a second ago, does reapplying work? So we've got some data. These data are taken from the 18-19 UCAS cycles. This is because a whole bunch of weird stuff happened to everything during the coronavirus pandemic. And so I try to avoid using the 2 COVID years too much any of the data analysis we do. I double check to make sure that the trend lines aren't crazy, but I find that the information from the 2 years prior is a lot more reliable. Next year, we've got 2 post-COVID years to work from. I'll be switching to the post-COVID data sets, but for the time being, I find it more useful to use these ones that don't have all of the confusions of the virus involved. So to look first of all at computer science, what we see is that the admissions rate for people who are applying for the second time is meaningfully higher than it is the first time, right? About 25% higher. Computer science, as you can see, is a really competitive subject. Only about 1 in 8 students are getting in. But that step up from 1 in 8 to 1 in 7 is really pretty meaningful. It's 25%, that's close to a 25% adjustment in relative terms. And when we're looking at a course that this competitive, that really isn't a worthwhile edge. If we look at experimental psychology at Oxford, which was one of our colleagues, I think Will's an experimental psychology guy, isn't he?
He is, yeah. I don't know if he got in first or second time round, I'm not sure, but yeah, experimental psychology.
I'll have to ask him.
Yeah.
So yeah, drawing from an even larger data set here across 4 cycles, what we can see is that students who are applying for the second time are getting in at almost double the rate of students who are applying who are going for on their first attempt. We see a similar pattern with history at Oxford. Students who are applying for a second time, and it's a really substantial share of students going for a second attempt for this course. We see that they're getting in at 10 points higher, taking you from a 1 in 4 shot to better than a 1 in 3 shot, which is a really significant difference. History and politics, we see a similar effect, even bigger actually, where the students who are applying for the second time, they're going from a 14% to a 21% chance. That's a really massive rate of change. That's a 50% increase in your odds, and you're looking at going from just better than a 1 in 8 chance to better than a 1 in 5 chance. So you are in a sense overtaking 2, 2.5, maybe even 3 people just by going around for a second attempt. The law at Oxford, another really popular subject to reapply to. We see that the success rate is almost a third higher for going again, up there to above 20% from only around 16%. And for law at Cambridge, again, It's not all good news. I didn't want to be too selective with my examples. Law at Cambridge students are succeeding at a slightly lower rate when they come to apply. So if you're thinking of reapplying, maybe going Oxford, or Cambridge, Oxford is the way to go, rather than Cambridge, or Oxford, Cambridge. But I wouldn't let these statistics absolutely stand in your way. It's just a case of contextualizing. You've got just as good a chance as you might think, as you might hope. We see, again, with human, social and political sciences at Cambridge, there's essentially no change between first and second time applications, 23% versus 22%. And we see similarly with economics at Cambridge, there's a fairly small gap, only 3 percentage points in it. However, there is the most interesting subject here, which I've saved till last, which is PPE at Oxford. As you can see, it gets an absolutely insane number of applicants. Nearly 10,000 applicants a year on average in the pre-coronavirus years. What we notice is that not only are well over 5% of people applying for PPE applying a second time, but they're getting it at a 50% better rate than students who were applying on their first time. So you're getting a real payoff to going for a second time round there, really improving your chances. So the first thing you want to be doing if you're thinking about reapplying is making sure that you're using all of the feedback you've got, whether that's feedback you're giving yourself, whether that's from the universities, whether it's your test scores, to guide you what your approach is going to be. Was the problem the interview? Was the problem the admissions test? Was the problem the personal statement? Is the problem that you've changed your mind about the subject? If you want to, take the time to reflect and really figure out why you want to study that subject, or perhaps a different subject. When I applied to Oxford, a very long time ago, I didn't get in. I applied for classics, and when I did go to university, I went to King's instead. I lasted about 3 weeks in classics before going, oh God, I don't want to be doing this. So it's sort of lucky I didn't get into Oxford to study classics, because it turns out I didn't want to study classics at all, anywhere. That might be your situation. You want to really make sure that you're going for the right subject, that you really do want to study it, because hopefully, as a young person, your ideas, your interests, your passions are changing. A year is a long time if you're 17 or 18. It's what, well, 1/17 or 1/18 of your life. You weren't doing much the first couple of years. You want to be really making sure the subject you're going for is the one you want to, and you've really understood what about it you're passionate about. Now, the next one is pretty obvious. You're doing your A-levels, your baccalaureate, your Scottish Highers, Irish Leaving Cert, whatever exam it is you're doing, make sure you do really well. You want to make sure that you're getting those top marks so that you've got them, in hand when you come to apply. You don't have to worry about them again. Get some good marks. And make sure that you are building long-term skills for the admissions tests and the interview, particularly the interview, that you are developing the tools you need to have the kind of academic conversations, to engage in complicated dialogue, to make arguments and counter-arguments orally rather than just in writing. Make sure that you're building those skills all the way up so that you're actually improving and developing as you get closer to the interview, rather than just coming back again with the same set of skills as you were a year ago. And that's the most important thing about the gap year you're perhaps going to take. Make sure you do something interesting with it if you can. If you need to earn money, make sure that you are giving yourself the opportunity to do interesting, creative academic work alongside that. Make sure that when you come to reapply, that you can clearly state what it is that you've done in that extra year that makes you a better candidate, the books you've read, the ideas you've had, the theories you've developed, and that you're improving your chances by being a year later a better candidate because you've had a year's extra development. You want to be coming back, we talked about it being a 17th or an 18th of your life. You want to do better than that. You want to come back 10, 15, 20% better for that year of extra preparation. Speaking of preparation, James is going to talk a little bit about the kind of support and preparation that we offer as an organisation. James.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I just wanted to say, because I speak to a lot of parents, a lot of students every year, and I appreciate if you do, get a rejection, it's quite an emotional experience. I think it's really, really important not to see it as a failure or a reflection of you. I wouldn't let it knock your self-esteem. It's a really, really competitive application process. And if you were rejected, you're in the same boat as an enormous amount of other people. So I know that's easy for me to say, but really don't let it knock your confidence. If you're going to reapply, or even if you're not going to reapply, just make sure you're making the decision for the right reasons. In terms of support, if you haven't sort of realized already, we're actually a preparation school. So we specialize in supporting students applying to Oxford and Cambridge. Quite a lot of our students every year are reapplicants. Perhaps they've attempted to apply on their own and it's not worked out for them. So they seek out, some support in applying, and that's what we do. So we're a preparation school. We're not really a sort of tutoring company. We have a very kind of structured program of support that prepares students for their application. Typically a program sort of consists of 4 parts. And so we're just very briefly just going to talk about those just to give you a sense of what this might look like. So the first part of a program is one-to-one tuition. So it's important that you're obviously guided in the right way. And so our students will work with a tutor who's sort of been through the same process as them. So for example, if you're reapplying to PP at Oxford, you're going to be working with a tutor who themselves studied PP at Oxford. So someone who's sort of been through the same process successfully and worked with other students to get offers at Oxford. So you'll have them in your corner, helping you prepare for, in the case of PP, the TSA, your interviews, your personal statement. So yeah, one-to-one tuition is a big part of it. Secondly, all of our resources. So we've been doing this a long time. You may or may not be aware, we've published quite a large number of books, many award-winning books. You may find that your school library actually contains some of these. So alongside your tutoring, you're working with our resources, the books. We have an online preparation portal that's sort of the hub of our program, and it's where you work through a kind of structured syllabus of learning and revising and kind of taking timed tests and uploading, written work and all of those sorts of things. So that's sort of second part of things. This is fantastic synchronization here, the slides changing. Thirdly, seminars. So particularly in terms of your preparation for interview, it's really, really important that you're practicing discussing these topics related to your subject. It's so important. So kind of weekly, we have our enrichment seminars where, other students applying to your subject and our lead tutors, we look at a different key topic within that subject, and then we're sort of discussing them in the same way that you'll be expected to do an interview. So it's really sort of polishing your ability to communicate and articulate yourself on these topics. And then finally, generally the programs have courses as well. So these are sort of one-day intensive courses for the personal statement, for the test, the interviews, just to sort of consolidate all of these things that we've been doing and make sure you're peaking at the right time, really. So in essence, it's a structured program. It's designed to support a student over a lengthy period of time and make sure you're doing the right things at the right time, because you have a finite amount of time and you need to be making sure you're managing everything and you're doing everything at the right time. And then you need the input to improve, essentially. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. Back to you, Matt.
Thanks, James. I hope the slides were beautifully coordinated.
Fantastic. Yeah, we should come up with a hand signal or a gesture, maybe, but I think it works quite well as it is.
Gives me something to do while I'm resting my voice. We're really pleased to say that all of the support we provide seems to work. Our success rates are substantially higher than the national average, and we're particularly proud of our rates of success for medical school. We're still optimistic about getting our 500th offer this year when the Cambridge offers come out in the next few weeks. But I think we're very close. I don't think we've got a counter or anything on the website, but it's something we're all rather excited about if it comes in. It all seems to compare pretty well with some of the fancier schools in the country as well. We don't quite have the outfit to be, but we do have a really comparable success rate, which is something we're really proud of. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what it is like to work with us from the other side, please do take a look on Trustpilot, have a look at the things other people have said about us. We are, we're proud of what we do, and so we're very keen for you to see not just what we think we do, but what other people think as well. Also, if you've enjoyed this webinar, and I've been saying this for months now, and it still hasn't happened. If you've enjoyed this webinar, please write a review of the webinar on Trustpilot. Say how much you've enjoyed listening to me, to James, say how handsome we are, and I will put your review in all future webinars. All of them. Every week you'll be here. What better incentive could there be than that? We also have a podcast in which my colleagues Will and our founder Rohan discuss pretty much everything from admissions tests through to the zombie apocalypse. So I recommend that. And if you want to get in touch with us, maybe the video will work this year. You can do that by visiting our website, as is being shown by this perhaps slightly patronizing video, and booking a consultation with us. And what we'll do while the video plays is we'll take some questions. We have already had a few. So Siva asks about the personal statement. It's been all over the news, hasn't it, James? What's happening to the personal statement?
Yeah, so I mean, it's changing, but I don't believe that it's changing this year, this application cycle that's coming up. Am I right in thinking that?
That's my understanding as well, that it's changing, not for students applying in September this year, but September next year. But I'm going to double check because I'm not very good at remembering which year is which. It's my other job outside of this is I do a little bit of accountancy, and years work differently in accountancy, and it's very confusing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it this year. It's going to be the same format. In future years, they're going to change it slightly so that rather than one sort of continuous piece of text that you have to write, there will actually be questions and prompts, and then you'll sort of complete it a little bit more like a questionnaire, I guess. And there are various reasons why they're doing that, which, perhaps for another time. But yeah, for this application cycle, if you're applying for 2024 entry, as we know it currently, the personal statement will be the same.
Yes, no changes until September 2024 at the earliest. So you don't have to worry about it until after the Paris Olympics. That isn't how other people think of time? Fine. We had a couple of questions about colleges. Should you apply to the same college the second time, or should you apply to a different college? Do you have a view on this, James? I have a view.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's hope our views align. I would advise against applying for the same college. Absolutely, apply for the same course at the same university, but I do think that it may present some difficulties, because if you're interviewing in front of the same panel, perhaps there's some unconscious bias there if they already know you. I don't know. I just would say it's a safer bet to apply to a different college. Do you echo that, Matt?
Yes, I would say I wouldn't worry so much about the unconscious bias. What I would be thinking about is the impact on you. If you are applying to study the same course at the same college, you're coming back a year later to perhaps be interviewed by the same people, that's going to be much more stressful. You're going to remember their faces, you're going to be having dreams about them. It's going to make the whole process much more emotionally taxing. You're much better off going in and seeing new people you've never seen before, not having that real sense that you're having, that you're doing it again as much. You don't want the deja vu of seeing the same person again. So I would say go for a different college just because you want it to be a new and fresh experience. What you don't want to do is go through the whole thing feeling like you're traveling back in time, trying to undo your mistakes. That's not what you want. Tina asks about how to get in touch with us. Here's the lovely video, Tina. We look forward to hearing from you. Suleiman asks about reapplying to Oxford while studying at another uni. So Oxford are very clear about this. The answer is no. If you've been studying at, if you get an offer this year from, let's say, UCL or Edinburgh, and you decide to start there in September, but apply to Oxford again a couple of months later in October, Oxford will not consider you. As far as they're concerned, if you've gone to another uni, that's absolutely fine, well done. You can come back if you want a master's degree, they'll consider you then, but they will not consider students who are studying at another UK university. So this is why we talk about reapplication being a big commitment, because it does mean that you essentially can't go to university next year while you reapply. So that's something that's really important to take into account. Tina asked about the deadline for reapplying. So the deadline for reapplying will be the same as it was this year. So we're talking about, I think it's normally the 15th of October, isn't it, James? I don't think it even shuffles around based on the day of the week anymore.
No, yeah. So October the 15th is correct. So yeah, if you're reapplying, essentially you're going through the whole process again, submitting personal statement, taking the admissions test, submitting a UCAS application in October. So that's why it's a big commitment, because it's, a big commitment of time.
Yeah. Yes, that's 9 months and 1 day, which is a long old time. I can think of other things you can achieve in 9 months and 1 day, but I wouldn't recommend them if you're about to go to uni. Unhelpful. India asks about calling up the university or colleges to see if there are extra spaces if you get really high A-level grades. In the case of Oxford and Cambridge, unfortunately not. They're not in the situation where they have a shortage of students. If they had a shortage of students, well, there wouldn't be any need for our support. They will be absolutely full, unfortunately, with all the students they've made offers to in the first instance. Now, if you do get straight A stars, if you do perform spectacularly well in your A-levels, that really is an advantage if you come to apply again. Firstly, because you don't have to do your A-levels again. You don't have to have a nightmare about that. That's definitely a nightmare I have sometimes, about having to do my A-levels again. But also that when compared with students who haven't done their A-levels yet, who only have predicted grades, you'll be applying with real grades, no predicting involved, already know how well you did. So that gives you an advantage there as well, on top of all of the extra time for preparation we've talked about. So unfortunately, there's no scope for Oxford or Cambridge in clearing, but those top grades can really stand you in good stead if you come to apply again. And I think finally, there's a question from Jas, who asks what the minimum score on the TSA for PPE is. Now, this is a great example of the kind of question we can answer in one of our consultations. I do know the answer. Unfortunately, it's in a spreadsheet in a couple of folders, and I can't get to it while I'm doing the presentation. This is information we absolutely have. I have lots of graphs, it's all there, but unfortunately, while I'm making the presentation, I can't get to them. However, if you give us a ring, get in touch with us, this is absolutely the kind of insight we can find for you. and give you the contextual information to understand as we sort of build up a sense of what kind of program would work for you. But unfortunately, because of the limitations of the webinar format, there really isn't very much I can do because I've got this PowerPoint presentation running and I can't get to Excel while I'm running it.
And off the top of my head, I mean, obviously you need to see the results and everything, but I'd say, you know, 70 is a comparatively good score. And I think, you know, the kind of magic number to aim for would be probably around 75. But it does vary year upon year, you know, as Matt says, and we've got some really good data on that. So yeah, give us a call and we can give you a bit more information.
Fab. Well, thank you for such a wide variety of excellent questions. And we will look forward to seeing you again next week. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about yet. So that's an extra exciting mystery for you all. I don't know what it will be about. Let's all find out together.
I, for one, am very excited.
So thank you very much for your time, James.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And have a lovely weekend, everyone. We'll see you next week for something else. It'll probably be to do with getting into university, let's face it. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything about the World Cup or about cookery. I think it'll probably be more or less the same sort of stuff, but who knows?
Would be a nice curveball though, wouldn't it?
I think it would be really difficult to get my laptop to do cookery because all the angles and the camera and the kit. No, I think we'll probably not do cookery. Anyway, We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.